Welcome everyone to another episode of the Lofthouse Group Podcast, where we speak to leaders within the architecture and interiors industry. I'm Ryan Gorman, director of Lofthouse Group, and today we're talking about all things hospitality because our guest today is Paul Wells, who's partner at Dexter Moren Associates. Paul, I would go into a great old detail about who you are and what you do, but I think you're going to do it much more articulately than me, and I'm sure you're not going to make any mistakes. For anyone listening to this, I've had to do this intro take about 4 times, so I'm not going to try and introduce who you are, Paul, other than partner at Dexter Moren Associates. But let's start off the show with welcome, by the way. Good to have you on. Can we start off for the benefit of the audience? Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and I guess just how you got to where you are today, really? What brings you here?
Yeah, so I joined Dexter Moren Associates 9.5 years ago now, actually. Incredibly, it's gone very quickly. And I came from more of a residential background, actually. So when I came out of university, I worked for residential architects for a number of years, and then I joined DMA, mainly because I wanted to diversify my own experience, and I'd always wanted to work in hospitality. And DMA obviously have a strong heritage in that. We're 30 years old next year, so 30 years of hospitality experience. And I became a partner nearly 3 years ago with the practice, and I head up sort of a number of planning projects and feasibility stages, but I also coordinate some construction work across our projects, which include residential, hospitality, service departments, and all things in between.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take you even a step further back, just because I think it's always interesting for people. You know, you are where you are now, but what was it that got you? What was it that inspired you to get into architecture all them years ago?
It's actually, I think for a lot of people, architecture is a vocation rather than a sort of decision when they're 16 years old. And oddly enough, I can't remember a point in my life where I didn't want to draw buildings. And I think, sad as that sounds, I think somebody said to me when I was about 3 or 4 years old, you should be an architect, haha. And here I am. And I've literally the whole time, through primary school, senior school, and obviously through university, I wanted to be an architect. And it's interesting how many people I meet in the profession who have a similar backstory, that they played with Lego as young children and sort of became a whole way of life.
I wonder if that's going to be the future. Is going to be, instead of Lego, it's going to be I played Minecraft as a child, and then I ended up becoming an architect. Yeah,
I'm trying to discourage my son from doing that, but he already builds buildings regularly in Minecraft. So he gets very excited when he's got a villa to show me. So,
well, I'm having to tell my wife that actually it's going to be okay for my daughter to play video games, because look, they could build buildings. Minecraft's great. It leads on to architecture, but I'm having a bit of a harder time. I think it's more that she knows that I just want to sit and play Mario Kart with her. But I guess so. You mentioned that you didn't work in hospitality originally, but then you kind of have moved into working within hospitality. What was it about that sector? You said it was to diversify your experience, but what was it specifically about the hospitality industry that appealed to you?
So I mean, not to be disparaging to the residential market, but I did a lot of social housing, and I got a little bit maybe discouraged by the constant value engineering and the experience that you have through doing developments of that sort. And I just got very excited by the idea that the hotels, the finishes are what really sells a project. And quite often we find that the value engineering happens much earlier on. And when you're getting onto site and you're getting into the finishes, that just is part of selling that dream of that hospitality experience. And I think I was very attracted to the idea that I might just get a project built that I was excited about and I wanted to stay in. And I've always been interested in hotels. I've always been interested in travel. I think a lot of people are. It's not an unusual thing to enjoy. But when I was a student, I used to think I'd love to do a job where I can travel and I can design the sort of hotels that I want to stay in, and sort of experience life within the buildings that I design. Because that's the other thing about residential, you design them, you're very excited about it, and then they get sold, and you never really see how people live in the spaces. You never see how how the occupants experience the buildings you've designed, whereas at least with hospitality, I can go and sit in the lobby of one of the hotels I've worked on, and I can see people enjoying it, or maybe not, and I can learn from that. But it's very important that for me that I can see how occupants work within one of my buildings, and actually I think residential doesn't give you quite the same opportunities that the hospitality sector does.
I think it's not just residential either. I think there's very few other sectors that allow that level of, I guess, being able to experience the buildings you've built, other than hospitality, really. And even not just, as an architect, anyone can, even if it's a very, very high-end hotel, you might, a very, very high-end expensive hotel, you might not be able to afford to stay there, but you can go into the lobby and still experience some part of that, which for me, as a non-architect, I've always found really interesting, being able to actually go and visit and experience some of these projects that you hear about and you see published about. And that's what's always attracted me to hospitality. And I guess another thing, which we're going to be talking about today, is how it evolves, how it has evolved and how it is evolving. But one thing I think is probably worth us speaking about is, I think a lot of people watching this, when and I know the topic of today is going to be about hospitality, but I thought it was worth mentioning that I think a lot of people, when they think of Dexter Moren Associates, they think hotels, hospitality, and that's it. But it's much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, so we work across a lot of sectors now. So residential sort of one end, and you've got the hospitality hotel at the other end. And in the middle, there's a whole lot of areas now that are merging into hospitality. So retirement living, serviced apartments, co-living, build to rent, all these products now have an element of front of house provision, if you like, about them. So there's an aspect of communal living, community involvement. And actually, I think it's really interesting how our hotel experience is now really informing these spaces, and we're working increasingly across other sectors where you might not have originally thought of DMA, but now very much people are coming to us because of our hospitality experience, because we understand how buildings work, we understand how to encourage people to use these spaces, and our interiors team coupled with the architecture team, we can deliver projects and hopefully places people want to live or just experience being in, whether it's a hotel lobby or a community lounge area.
Yeah, there's a lot of for the listeners, we're going to talk about the overlap between residential architecture and other sectors, and hospitality, and how some of those skills from other sectors kind of feed into hospitality, and how you could cross over, I guess, like you did, Paul, how you moved across into hospitality architecture. But I guess you can't really at the minute mention hospitality without mentioning COVID-19. Like, sorry, because I know you've probably had you've probably been asked this, and it's probably been like it's like Voldemort in Harry Potter. It's like, he should not be named, do not mention a COVID-19 in the hospitality sector at the minute. But I guess without getting too personal, like, how did it, like, talk me through, as somebody who's a specialist in hospitality architecture, when COVID-19 came around and it started to become more and more apparent that this was going to be, a big deal, and it was going to be sticking around. Like, how did it feel as that realization set in?
There was clearly a bit of a nosedive on work, on feasibilities and projects coming forward. I think one of the biggest things for us as a practice, and personally, hospitality was always going to come back. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very interested in travel, and that's not an unusual aspect of human nature. We love travel, we love social experiences, we enjoy seeing the world, or seeing even our local country, so it was always going to come back. I think the big question was, when was it going to come back? Yeah. And in many ways, COVID should have been the opportunity for some hotels to say, right, we've been looking to do a refurb, we've been running at 80%, 90% occupancy. Now we're at 0% occupancy. Let's do something. But of course, the funding stopped, and that was the problem. But it wasn't an easy year. I think it wasn't an easy year for anyone. Homeschooling was difficult enough without throwing in the work side of things. Yeah. But we're definitely out the other side of that now, and we're seeing a massive increase. But what's interesting is we are seeing a lot of our clients now diversify their portfolios. So where we might have had a planning permission for a hotel, we're now looking at alternative uses, whether that's student or co-living or build to rent, and we're repurposing the massing that we got permission for maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, and looking at alternative uses in some cases. Some cases, of course, hotels just are very buoyant. I think we've got 6 openings this year with hotels that have been delayed from last year through site closures or delays. But no, I think it was a tough year, but we're coming out the other side, particularly in the UK. We're seeing a big increase. That's
good. And I think that as an industry-wide, speaking as, as a recruitment business owner, we're seeing that the hospitality sector is just the demand for it is really busy, which is always, a good sign for the hospitality industry that, companies are hiring and projects are being built. But I'm even just at like a base, just a hotel visitor level, I'm seeing that there are changes. I went up to Leeds during this week as a reliving some of my childhood, going and seeing McFly up in Leeds, and stayed in a hotel, which is a hotel I know, very impressive. I'm from Leeds, but I stayed in a hotel that I've stayed in loads of times. It was just really interesting that the event space that they used to have packed out with people for parties and wedding parties has been turned into a co-working space now. And it's interesting, even not just seeing different types of hotels being different styles of hotels being built, but actually the kind of the change of use of space within these buildings as well. Is that something that I don't know, that you have existing clients that have already designed what the hotel's going to be, but are now rethinking the way that they utilize the space within there?
Well, we're not as dramatic as the case you just described. And if anything, in thinking the last 2 weeks, I've heard about so many awards dinners and events and conferences starting up again, that many of these event spaces finally are being used for the purpose they were designed for. Yeah. But it is interesting, the use of co-working and that shared environment. And that's something that's been actually coming into the hotel sector for probably the last 3 or 4 years. We've seen hotels leading the way in regard to where you previously might have had an empty lobby space with a reception desk and a concierge. They're very much, you go in now and it's a cafe working space, and you're almost looking for the reception desk when you go in, rather than that being the first thing you see. And I think that's been coming into the hospitality sector for a long time. If anything, COVID may have speeded up that kind of shift in the way that people think about their front of house spaces. Is very much at the forefront of people's mind. How do we have people activating these spaces, all day? So it's not just between 7 and 10 and then breakfast finishes and you wait for the lunch service. It's very much that you need to have people in these environments all the time, and they need to pay their way. And I think that co-working space is key to that. I love working in hotel lobbies. They tend to have good coffee and they smell nice. So, I think it's a great environment to sit in and work in. And actually, I think we will see more people doing that. In fact, we were discussing, weren't we, just before we started the recording, about how I read an article this week that many people are now, whose offices are closed, are now looking for alternative locations to work because they don't want to work at home. So the offices have gone, we're closing, everyone can work from home. People go, I don't want to work from home. I want to have that social environment and I want to go out to work. And in many locations, the hotel is a logical option for that, because there's not a co-working environment near them. You would immediately think of like a WeWork or something like that.
Yeah. I think it'd be great if they can do it well as well, because like the hotel that I went to, it's probably not the best example, because the co-working space was absolutely terrible. It was just like a few temporary desks that you could plug into the floor with. But I wonder if people are going to, because at the minute I suppose anyone can just go and sit in a hotel lobby, right, and just get on the Wi-Fi and have a coffee. But I wonder if there is going to be, well, you're probably going to be able to answer this. Is there going to be a future for specifically dedicated? You go and you work from a proper co-working space within a hotel?
Well, personally, I'm not seeing that happen in hotels so much. A lot of brands have not really bought into the specific locations for brands for co-working. There are examples, particularly within the service department sector, where co-working spaces are joined to those. I think the idea there that actually you would be a slightly longer term guest, and you do want a space that you could go and work in that is you're away from home. And maybe hotels are are slightly lagging behind on that. There will be, of course, examples of it, but it's not coming forward in so much as a specific designated room for co-working, which is interesting because actually I think you're right, probably should happen. It's definitely the future.
Well, I was just thinking on it because I was only thinking on it because of when I read that article about, again, which we were discussing, was about where people were using hotel rooms as like makeshift offices when the pandemic was in place, and hotels as a revenue stream were letting people have their you rent a room and just use it to go and sit there and work from and meet people if you need to. But I guess on other trends, because I guess there are in there, sustainability across architecture is just a big topic. Are you seeing much specifically within hospital? Like, are you seeing much of sustainability as a talking point specifically within hospitality?
No, hugely. So as architects, we've signed up to the Architects Declare, which basically we've declared that we want to look at sustainability as a key factor of all our designs, a key point. And a lot of our clients are looking at sustainability beyond the essential building regulation, BREEAM Excellent, which all our buildings are anyway, or under planning they're dictated to be. But actually, we're doing a number of projects. So, for example, we're doing a golf and spa resort out in Buckinghamshire, and that one is key driver, its key selling point is to be a sustainable resort, not to the full eco points, but the point that you go there and you feel like you're on a place which appreciates the value of sustainability, whether that's using rainwater to irrigate the greens and the golf courses, or whether it's down to not using small tiny little bottles of single-use plastics in the guest rooms. And I think that hotel particularly, the client there is very keen that that's its selling point. How does it compete in the market of more traditional large country estates that have been converted into hotels, and why would you go to a new build option instead? And that sustainability has to be a key factor of that. But generally, all buildings now are looking at that, and our first conversations are always around whether we can have a ground source heat pump or whether there's air source heat pumps, whether we need gas, whether we can go fully electric, whether that electric can be provided by PVs, whether we have solar thermal for hot water, whether we do rainwater harvesting, do we even need air conditioning in some locations? I think that the use of air conditioning has become just an expected norm. But actually in the UK, we generally don't need air conditioning the majority of the year. So can it be naturally vented? Post-COVID, actually, can we open our windows again on these buildings? So many buildings are sealed and therefore have to have this conditioned air. But actually coming out of COVID, that feeling that people want to have control of their own environments and open a window in certain locations, obviously not high rise in the same respect, but certainly our more rural hotel developments are now looking at having that ability that you can open the window and naturally vent your room. A shocking thought 2 years ago. We're coming but COVID generally, I think it will have impacts like that we'll look at how we ventilate and how we control our own environments, and certainly certain sectors of the hospitality industry like service apartments have done very well out of COVID, insofar as you have that autonomy in your guest room, that you feel that you have control of your own space. You're not in so many shared environments, and obviously introducing a lot more technology into rooms, whether that's mobile phone controls for your guest doors, and all of that is great. But actually, I think people's habits, will very much revert to where we were, and people will travel, and face masks will no longer exist, and so on and so forth.
Have you seen much? Because we won't talk about predicting the future in terms of hospitality, as time will tell. But in terms of what you're seeing right now, are you seeing any shift in terms of the types of hotels that companies are looking to invest in, whether they be like lifestyle hotels or I guess any other types of hotels in particular?
Yeah, certainly we're seeing more what I guess you would term a UK resort, like this golf and spa resort. We're also doing a spa hotel down in Devon. And I think, of course, there's always been a marketplace for these, but I think there's more assurance at the moment that people come and use these UK resorts because they're not traveling abroad as much. And I think, although a lot of us are very encouraged and want to go abroad, there's still a number of people that will rely on UK experiences going forward for a foreseeable number of years. And therefore, there's more certainty within that type of environment. And we're seeing it definitely. Mm-hmm. More rural resorts, more tertiary and secondary cities are developing their hotel markets more strongly, and it's quite an exciting time for UK hospitality. I think there's got to be something good come out of this COVID situation, and hopefully that will be a recognition that the UK is a great place to go on holiday as well.
Well, are you seeing much difference between the UK hospital, because Dexter Moren Associates, you work on international schemes as well, right? Are you seeing much difference between the UK hospitality market versus internationally?
The hospitality international market for us hasn't changed much. Mm-hmm. I would have thought. We still are working on a number of schemes across Africa, and we're looking at stuff in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, and actually, generally speaking, a lot of that is still that city hotel and the sort of resorts that you would have expected to be in those destinations. So we did a couple of resort projects in the Cape Verde, for example, and they're very similar to what you would expect a resort to be. Yeah. I think the expectation is that the design industry needs to acknowledge what's happening right now. I think we need to be aware that there's possibly quite a huge environmental disaster happening with the single-use plastic screens and lateral flow tests and all the rest of it going on. Mm. But actually, in the long term, these buildings aren't going to be terribly different to what they were pre-COVID. I think the biggest difference is going to be through the M&E strategies and the cleaning strategies.
It's because I remember pre-COVID, hospitality was seen as a huge growth sector. Like every practice that I spoke with who wasn't doing hospitality yet was trying to get into it, and everyone lost interest when COVID happened. And now it seems to be without this, probably not going to come across quite well, and I'm sure I'll get loads of comments. But obviously, COVID has been terrible, right? There's no debate about that, right? But a lot of positive things have emerged in response to it. You know, the uptake of being able to, like, home working, right? That's jumped years forwards, faster than I imagine it would have been if we hadn't have had COVID. Have you seen in your experience any huge shifts specifically within hospitality or within architecture that you don't think could have happened? Not even necessarily just this quickly, but people would have really even considered had the pandemic not happened?
Well, as a practice, we're much more flexible in our working methods now. You know, everybody's we're still in the process of doing it, but everybody's moving into laptops. We're not replacing sort of permanent desktop computers with that anymore. They're all going to that flexible working of having a laptop. We've onboarded people all on Zoom, connected people working in Italy, and they've joined our practice, and they've never even been to the office. And sort of 2 months later, they finally have managed to move to the UK, and we've met them in person. You think we've been working together for 3 months, and that was unthinkable 2 years ago. You'd been like, you're in Italy, call me when you get to London. And actually, I think that what the last year has taught us, and like you say, technologies jump forward years. In fact, I read somewhere that technologies move forward in 15 years forward in terms of where we would have been had we just been going at the same pace we were. And actually the ability to sit down, I mean, you and I are in completely different counties, I would have thought, right now, and we're talking as if we're in the same room. And I think that has made a huge shift in the way we work as well, because, for example, this project down in Devon, we're working with consultants from all over the UK on that project, and we just have Teams meetings all the time, and we're able to liaise and coordinate much better than having that one meeting a month. When you'd actually been in a room, you're like, right, I have to hit all these points or I'm not going to see you for another month. And actually, I think that collaboration and that working method is very positive for the industry. Obviously, we still need to go to site, and we will, and there'll be occasions. But I think during tender periods and even during planning, once you've got over that initial site visits and you understand the project, Teams is really relaxed how we can work. And I think as a profession, architecture was one of the last to really get on board with that, you know, home working, flexible life. And I'm really glad to see it come forward. I think it is hugely positive.
Well, you raise an interesting point there, because I guess you raise an interesting point around, like the project in Devon, dealing with clients that are in more remote locations. Because I've had this conversation with so many practice owners about trying to win projects in areas where they don't have an office, and that it's always historically been really tricky to win projects because clients feel more reassured if they know that that practice is, nearby or in the area. But do you think that is this going to help practices win projects in areas that they don't necessarily have a satellite? A practice is going to need to set up a satellite office anymore in every area that they're working in now? Or do you think that this Teams is also going to help in terms of winning new work?
It definitely helps in terms of winning new work. I mean, I'm liaising now with clients in Germany and Israel and Dubai, and we're having Teams conversations about projects. Whereas previously it would either been on the telephone, which is quite difficult when you can't really see the person and relate and show drawings, or we just had to wait till they were in the UK. And obviously at the moment that's not happening. So we've been forced down this route. And I think it's positive, because we still need to have the face-to-face meetings, and I look forward to when they come to London or we can travel to the sites. Yeah. But actually in between, there's always a period of time when you think, I could really do with showing you something or explaining something to you. There's not just a PDF attached to an email. I think that's very positive. But I do think as well that that as a practice, we've always worked abroad with local partners, and that will continue. We don't have satellite offices all over the world. What we do is we interview local architects, and we have a close working relationship with them while projects are on site. And I think that will continue. But what will happen is we'll probably have an even closer relationship with them, because we'll be able to more closely monitor and discuss even difficult details or site problems. People can take us round on their phones and have an immediate conversation. And like I say, it's not that this technology didn't exist, it's just that we didn't use it. And I think that the last year has meant that everybody started using it, and it's made life easier.
Yeah, definitely. It's 5 years ago, if we talk, just even from a recruitment perspective, if someone said that they wanted a new job where they get to work 2 days a week from home, I mean, it would be a pretty tall order me trying to find them a job. Whereas now it seems to be an industry. It kind of just is an indicator of the times that we live in now. The times have changed. That now seems to be the most common working practice out there at the minute, or some sort of mixture of home versus office working. But I guess that leads us quite nicely on to talking about. We wanted to focus a portion of this chat on what it's like to be an architect, within hospitality, not just the hospitality industry, but why it's an interesting time to be an architect working in hospitality right now. So, yeah, I guess to that effect, almost like just repeating what I've just said, like, in your opinion, why do you think it's an interesting time to be an architect working within hospitality right now?
Yeah, well, as you know, I've always thought hospitality was interesting, so slightly biased perhaps on the answer to this question. But I think what's happened is, for example, we're doing a project in Camden, which is actually 5 minutes from our office. I haven't met the clients, and I've been working with them for nearly 15 months. And it's just because everything started online. It already had planning, and we did amendments to it. So it was already the bones of the project there. But we did everything from Google Earth. We did everything online. We have all our monthly DTMs, and we've just submitted stage 4 this week on that project. It's going to site soon, hopefully. And yeah, I've not met the clients. And actually, what's strange about that one is it's literally on my walk to work. I now walk past the site. I'm going back into the office regularly, and actually, I think that's really kind of says it all about how we're working now. But I think it's really exciting because we can work on projects that aren't on our doorstep, and we can start up whole relationships with clients that we've never even met before online. And actually, you feel like you know them. So for example, at the moment, I'm also looking at another project with some clients from Israel, and we have Teams calls, and I feel like I know them, even though they've never been to the UK since I met them. And actually, I think that's hugely exciting for the hospitality sector, because the world's becoming smaller. So actually the idea of doing a project abroad or having clients that are abroad trying to explain what's going on in the UK, it all has become simpler, which means the opportunities are bigger and there's more opportunity there. So you're not waiting for that I don't know, the one flight a week to some place where you really want to do a project, but it's quite hard to get to, and you question whether the logistics work, and suddenly the logistics do work. And so as a company based in London, we're more free to work more extensively, if you see what I'm trying to say. For example, we've always worked down the Africa and sector time primarily because the timeline works, and you can travel to site without too much jet lag. But actually, if you're not traveling to site and you can coordinate your Zoom meetings early in the morning or late in the afternoon with timelines elsewhere, what's now to stop us working more outside those timelines? Because we can. So I think as a practice that does hospitality, I think that's exciting. But also I think hospitality is quite exciting because people are traveling again and people are excited about it again. So I think, like, whereas previously it might have been, I went to a conference in Berlin last week, or whatever it might have been, and you traveled regularly. Now it's, I haven't been on a plane for 18 months. I'm quite excited just to fly up to Glasgow. And, I think that it's like travel's become this new thing again. And people have that new energy associated with hospitality, and that gives obviously huge advantages as architects in the sector as well, because it means you can experience that with them and jump on board with that enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I suppose hospitality is I don't want to say it's probably a small portion of UK architecture as a whole, right? So the chances are most architects in London or in the UK won't have got hospitality architecture experience, but imagine any listening to this or any must have an interest in hospitality, and given that it's an interesting sector to work in right now, if someone's got no experience working in hospitality right now, but they want to try and transition across like you did, how big's the learning curve for someone who's worked in other sectors like residential or commercial projects to then move into hospitality?
So obviously, I think we'd be underselling ourselves if we said hospitality was easy. There is a particular knowledge and sort of set of skills that you have to understand, particularly how hotels operate. I think any architect worth their salt will be able to design a hotel room and understand the concept of a corridor and a lift, but actually understanding how hotels operate. And one thing we regularly see when we receive sites that already have planning is how they don't operate as hotels, and they haven't really understood how the brand will use that building. So what I would say is that you should apply for a job at an architecture company like ourselves, who obviously specialize in it. But the learning curve is less steep for architects that are have a good, strong understanding and good grounding in residential. I would have thought particularly there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of crossover areas, and just working with a strong team that work collaboratively in house. So when I joined DMA, obviously I'd got no hospitality experience at all, but then I've worked closely with Dexter and Herbert in the office over the last 9 years, and my experience has just increased, my knowledge has increased, and I feel relatively competent now, I hope, to be able to design a hotel. And I think that just comes with experience of working in the practice. But certainly when we're recruiting, we don't focus on having hotel as experience as a must. We're much more focused on whether you have a suitable grounding in the profession and a knowledge of space and understanding. And you get that when you meet somebody. You'll immediately know whether they just get it, if you like. But yeah, for example, we recruited a new architect last week with no hospitality experience, but we have absolutely faith that she'll be amazing contribution to our team and very quickly understand where we're coming from. And of course, the support is within the office to help anybody in that situation and make sure that the hotels work. So yeah, no, it's not a prerequisite that you must have done a hotel to work for us.
That's probably reassuring for a lot of people listening, because there's honestly, it's it's the same issue that I think a lot of architects face when it comes to software as well. Like, is that if you haven't used something before, but a company requires you to have used it, and the company isn't going to hire you without you already having used it, where do you ever get the chance to learn it if you have to have used it professionally, but no one will hire you if you haven't used it professionally? It's probably reassuring for a lot of people who want to get into hospitality that it's not necessarily, you know, as a hospitality specialist practice, that most people who know hospitality architecture probably have heard of DMA. It's probably quite reassuring to know that it's not one of them where you have to have done that before. Of the people that you have hired without experience, have there been any common traits? Or actually, let me rephrase this. If someone's sat in their practice right now and they think they want to get into hospitality, is there anything they can be doing right now that's going to kind of improve their chances of being able to transition across?
I mean, I think for us, skill sets are more important than knowledge of hotels, if you see what I mean, because we have enough knowledge of hotels in the practice that nothing's going to leave the office that hasn't been checked and doesn't operate and function well. So I think obviously Revit is a key skill set for the majority of architects nowadays, and we're unlikely to recruit an architect for our construction team without Revit. But we quite happily look at people for our planning team without Revit, and we'll train them up in-house. The problem is, as you know, when we've had conversations about recruitment, we generally need somebody that can hit the ground running in the construction team, whereas there might be a bit more flexibility with planning. So I think Revit is a key one. I think if you don't use it in your current practice, you should do the online courses privately. So at least you come to an interview, you can say, like, I haven't used it professionally, but I've been doing the online. There's a lot of online tutorials and courses you can do just to bring yourself up to speed. As a practice, we use AutoCAD coupled alongside Revit, and our planning team still use SketchUp and Enscape, but we quite regularly employ people that know how to use Rhino, because if you can use Rhino, you can use SketchUp, you can use Enscape. You know, there's a lot of commonality between all the programs. So I would say that, you know, it's never a foregone conclusion. If you don't have Revit or you don't have SketchUp, you know, you can't work for us. It's not as simple as that. I think if you've got a strong CV and you've got a strong knowledge of software, even if it's not exactly what we use, I think that shows that you can learn that one, you'll be able to transfer. There's a lot of transferable skills between them. The one thing I think Revit is the way forward, and particularly if you want to work in construction, it's a skill set that you should work on privately if you've not got it professionally.
Good idea. That echoes exactly what I tell people as well, who are looking to learn it or work in a practice that uses it. I suppose in terms of like DMA, what can you tell me a bit about what you guys have been doing recently in terms of from like a people perspective? I know you mentioned that you've been working through like working from home policies and kind of shifting people onto laptops and stuff. Can you just tell me a bit more about, like, obviously they're going to look on the website and see what DMA is, and they're going to see a load of projects, but what is it about like the people and the culture that kind of sets you guys apart?
Well, I mean, I think
other than you working there and being excellent, you know.
Massive advantage of getting to work with me. I think you know we're actually desperate to get our team together again. I think we're all sick of Zooms. We're definitely sick of Zoom sort of parties, which are really not very much, a bit rubbish. And we all tried, you know, House Party and all these different apps when it came out. But I think a bit of lethargy set in, like earlier in this year, particularly, where people just went, I just can't be bothered. It's not. I don't get quite the same enthusiasm, but we've maintained we moved our Pilates classes. We have Pilates twice a week in the office, and we moved that online at the beginning of lockdown, and they are still online. So what's interesting there is the number of people that have joined with their housemates and their friends, and they've shared the link. And actually now, rather than sort of 12 of us in the meeting room, there's about 50 on the call, and it's, you know, it's a really quite a nice sort of social thing now as well. But we've restarted football in the office, so people are starting to meet up again for that. We've restarted social events, and a couple of weekends ago, we even managed to have our annual office trip. And unlike usual years where we'd have gone to Europe, we went to York, which was slightly close to home. But actually, I think the ability to get the team together in a social social environment and go somewhere together was just so exciting. And I think that home working is great to a point. Certainly having young children, I find my work-life balance is just much better. But I think we're ready for that personal and social connection again. And as a practice, we're very much people to be in the office 2 days a week. And then overlapping with that, we have the running club has started again, the football club started again. We've got Pilates, as I said, that stayed online. But pub on a Friday night, it's all coming back to life, and the networking events are starting again. Then the conferences are coming back to life, and I think that all of this is just helping you feel you've got that connection to the office, but coupled with that continued flexibility about how we work and where we work.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. York's pretty good. I spent 4 years of my life there, and I'm a Yorkshireman myself. So I hope there wasn't some. I hope you weren't insulting it when you said, people lucky to have a little trip up to York. It's all right. I know you spent time there as well, right?
Yeah, I did my part one placement in York for a conservation practice up there. But no, I love York. What I mean is that we all know that going abroad is a slightly different experience to a UK. Yeah. But no, Yorkshire, of course, a beautiful God's own country.
Good. There's a question that I always ask people, just kind of towards the end of an interview, just to round off, because I think it's always really important. But are there any, what important topics are there in architecture that you don't feel that enough people are talking about or addressing?
Oh, that's quite a big question. I think, people are talking about sustainability, but I do think there's a lot of talk and maybe not enough action. And obviously the Architects Declare is a great initiative to encourage architects to really sit up and say, we're at the forefront of the built environment, and it really starts with us. But I think what happens is that often we're also still guided by our clients, who will hit the guidelines and the government requirements. And actually, I think the government needs to be tougher. And actually, nobody wants to pay money basically in a hotel or a building or on things they can't see. But actually, the insulation and the MEP and the sort of foundations of how that building comes together are incredibly important. And I don't think we can talk enough about sustainability, actually, personally.
Is there much? Do you find that hospitality clients have much interest at all in the life cycle of the carbon life cycle of the materials that you're working with? Are they interested in where these materials have come from, rather than just, can we now operate this hotel in a kind of a net zero fashion? Are they interested in the actual carbon cost of construction?
No, they are. And I think there's obviously, we've got two types of clients. We've got the developers who build out a hotel and then franchise the building and don't operate or have any further involvement. And then we also have the client operator clients who are involved from the start and perhaps have a greater interest in the longevity and the costing and life cycle of a building, because they're paying for it more than maybe the developer who's going to hand it over. But what I would say is that everyone, without a doubt, now has a focus on longevity of buildings. And that isn't just an architecture thing, that's an interiors thing as well. It's important that all materials that go into a building have a good life cycle and also have a recycling potential in the future, so that they don't just go to landfill. Even if something has a 20-year life cycle, it still can't go or shouldn't go to landfill at the end of that period. So I think it is important, and people understand that.
And how's that impacting the role of the interior architects within DMA, their role in particular?
Well, they certainly spend a lot of time looking at life cycle and longevity of products. But the other thing, some of our projects have had a limit set on how far away from the hotel site they can source materials. So actually it's quite interesting as well how that's bringing in local craftsmanship and sort of playing along with that neighborhood story and local community interaction. And I think that's one of the best things that you get from hospitality, like we said earlier, how the community, and you can go and enjoy it, but also they are community buildings. And I think that if we can draw on that from our interior design and our interior product selection, people have already got an interest in that building when it opens its doors. They know someone that designed the tiles or provided the lampshades or whatever it might be. And actually, I think that's really interesting because, again, you don't get that in many projects in other sectors where perhaps the handover just happens and then you don't know what goes into them. But actually having that vested interest from the start is quite key. But yeah, certainly our interior designers are very much at the forefront of understanding what can go into these products and how it works, at least building side as products.
It's probably just a question of me being quite naive here, but like on the topic of sustainability, when you're sourcing products, how easy is it to get the information around like how sustainably it's put together, or like what the life cycle is?
Than it used to be. I think so no, any provider of a product now will be able to support their sustainability claims. If they've got claims, they'll support them, and if they don't, then you know that you're unlikely to be looking at them. But certainly sustainability sourced timber, for example, it's all certified. You know where it came from, you know how far it's traveled, and that certification is rolling out across a number of different types of product now, and we are able to look at those and understand exactly what's happened. Sorry, excuse me. So I think that is getting easier, and I think that's because suppliers now understand as well that if they're not giving us that information, we're not going to specify them, because we need that information to get our BREEAM points or just our own sustainability agenda brought into the project.
Cool. Well, I guess one thing before we go, I'd seen that you've just the Malmaison in York's just opened up, right? Are there anyone listening to this who's interested in kind of following DMA? We've got anything exciting to look out for? Any new projects coming up soon that people should be watching out for?
Absolutely, we've always got an exciting project, but right now we opened Hyatt Place, London City East, about 7 weeks ago, which has an amazing roof bar called Pocket Square. I was there last night. Some very wonderful cocktails on that menu, and a great view over Whitechapel and the east of London. But in the next month or so, we're also opening the Westin in the City of London, which is a 5-star Marriott brand, and it's got river frontage with a champagne bar and sort of reaches between the North Bank and St. Paul's, and then that will be opening very soon.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to you inviting me to that. Thank you. Big assumption there.
We have to test the champagne bar out.
When I was up in York, I was really annoyed. I've been, again, for anyone listening, this is probably not that interesting, but I was up in York, and I literally I only found out about the fact that you'd opened the hotel up there like after I'd come back. I wish I could have gone in.
As well. So you need to go and see it the next time you're up.
That's it. Yeah. Well, look, really good to have you on. Like, thank you so much for
having me,
for sharing your time with us, for giving us a bit more of an insight into what's going on within the hospitality sector, but also interesting for any architects listening who are interested in pursuing a career within hospitality. I think there's some really useful information in there. For anyone listening who wants to find out more about Paul, more about DMA, and just generally the projects that they've got going on and what's happening, if you're watching this on YouTube, in the description below, there will be links to their website, to Paul, and to any other useful links that Paul thinks is worth me sharing with you. And if you want to find out more about Lofthouse Group, there's going to be some more information there as well. But thank you to everybody who's tuned in and stayed with us and listened to all this. I hope you've taken something useful away from it. Thanks, Paul, for coming on. Hope you've had a good time.
Yes, thank you. That's great.
Thanks again, everyone, for watching. And until next time, speak soon.